David Fowley, you pretty much insisted that we talk about the movie we're going to talk about today before I finalized my best of 2022 list. And I'm glad you did because okay, there's no replacing RRR as my favorite film of like the last decade. But, but Broker, which actually opens today at the Music Box in Chicago, times and tickets below in the link, shameless plug, is, I was really conflicted because I'm watching this movie and I'm thinking this is pretty much one of the best things I've seen this year,
Yep.
if not way up there. SS Rajamouli, I love you, but this Broker film gets me in all the different places, and it drove into sharp focus. I gave up comic book movies over the course of this year to be, the hiatus is going to be lifted. I thought it was March, but actually Doctor Strange came out in May, so I got like 6 more months left of this, or
Oh my
five.
gosh, how much weight did you lose?
I've gained a ton, but the point is, I keep looking around at American cinema, and I'm like, this is just so uninteresting, so bland, so devoid of like ideas and actual like naturalistic performances.
Yeah.
What is going on here? Why do I have to go across the sea to find stuff that actually resonates with me?
Well, wait till I mean there's a robot girl around the corner, so you're fine. Yeah, I mean
Well,
I
you are teasing our Megan conversation, which will happen live next Thursday. And I gotta say, I drew some parallels to Megan with this movie.
that's hilarious.
No killer robots, but
Yeah. I mean, I mainly saw this movie because it's the latest from director Hirokazu Koreeda. And I think you're new to this director.
Yes, I think
Okay.
completely.
So from here, I would go to Shoplifters because that's probably he had like the movie before this was I think his first English movie called The Truth from 2019, and then Shoplifters was 2018. I've also seen 2013's Like Father Like Son. I
Was
really
that
want
was
to.
that a remake of the Kirk Cameron Dudley Moore movie from 1987?
I wish it was because like his Like Father Like Son was so amazing. That means that there's hope for remakes. Um, I still like he has a couple others on Criterion like Still Walking and Afterlife, and so I definitely want to catch up with him in his entire filmography. I think he's pretty amazing. So I wasn't I mean I was looking forward to another Koreeda movie, but and I wasn't really surprised that this was pretty amazing and on the level of the type of humanity that he brings to his movies, and such a great balancing of ensemble casts that he's known for. I mean, this one it competed for the Palme d'Or. I don't think it won, but it was at I think it premiered at Cannes last May, and then it hit theaters in South Korea in June, and then now it's coming here. It probably had a limited release um, around here, I guess, but um, yeah, it's a very interesting premise. It's basically essentially or initially about these two guys who work in modern day. Um, is it? It's not Seoul that they're in, is it? It's
There are a couple of different places. They mentioned
towns.
Busan, they mentioned Seoul. There's a few different places, but
Yeah, it's
it's a
not
city in
Seoul.
South Korea.
Yeah, it's in a town in South Korea where they are volunteers at a nearby church where they're at, and Ha Sang Hyun and Dong Soo. Ha Sang Hyun's played by Song Kang Ho from Parasite. Great to see him here, and Dong Soo's played by Gang Dong One. And I'm done for the day. No, but these two guys they're volunteers in a nearby church, and initially we're not sure like what they work for or what they work as. It's very kind of like mysterious, and that's one of the many things I appreciate about the director who also wrote the screenplay, is that he just lets things unfold and lets the audience trust the audience to figure it out. um Eventually we wind up in our mind later on kind of, oh, that's what this was about, and this person's connected to that. And I was watching this with my wife, and there's these two women, female characters that show up later, and I turned to her, I'm like, I think these two are detectives, and yeah, it turns out they are. But so these two characters run an illegal business together, and you would think, oh, are these corrupt, or kind of ex-cons or something that are working at a volunteering at a church. I mean, it could, if this was an American movie, it'd probably be a comedy, but they run a kind of illegal kind of networking scheme together, where they basically take these babies that have been left in baby boxes, which much surprise to me is something that's been around in the it's kind of like the American version of dropping your baby off at a fire station in a shoebox.
Well,
um,
apparently it is something they have these or a version of these in the States as well. Because I was describing
no
after watching the first, 45 minutes or so, I was talking about it to my wife, and she said, "Oh yeah, they've got those here too." And I was like,
no
just
I had no idea.
flabbergasted. Yeah.
Yeah. So you drop off your baby when, you're in a situation where you can't take care of the baby. And, this either, you know, a church has these baby boxes, or whatever, fire station, police station, whatever. And so these guys work for, volunteer there, and they basically wind up, deleting the church's surveillance footage, and it in doing so, they um trying to cover up their tracks. But what they try to do is they take these babies and they try and find them homes of maybe people who are not too far, live not too far away, but are more like well off and can pay a good deal. So that's one aspect of the story. But then, as the movie, even kind of in the colder open, we see actually a rainy night, a baby being dropped off by a young woman in this box, and they're also being watched from a nearby car by these other two women. Those other two women are the aforementioned detectives that I mentioned. We find out they're detectives later on, and she leaves a note saying, "I will be back to get you." Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So later on, we see this young woman come back and ask about this, child that she dropped off, and these, two men are surprised. And so what begins is this kind of, the three of them go on this kind of journey of, trying to find what happened with the baby, and what's going on. And along for the ride is this precocious young boy who is part of the this orphanage that they stop over on, where Deng So kind of grew up in. So it's a very interesting assortment of characters that are trying to kind of figure out things, with as in respect to, where this child can go, and where it would be adopted, who is the right fit. And you know I would say along the way, um, I don't see I don't see a whole lot of, um, this doesn't play out the way I would expect it to. So there's a lot of subversion, I think. I saw, because I feel like, oh, this is going to go darker because, of the business that they're in, and oh, this is not going to go well. But and what I mean by that is, I think that typically I would see more darker characterization for some of these, especially these two men who run this business. But they're actually, um, quite, I think, kind of well intentioned and kind hearted. Yes, they want to make some money, but they also want to find a good place for this baby. Um, anyway, I mean, did you feel like you as this movie unfolded, did you feel like, some of your expectations were kind of, you were taken aback a little bit?
Oh yeah. It's strange because you mentioned this could have gone darker. I think it goes plenty dark, but not in the, kind of cynical, dystopic kind of way. But
Yeah.
you learn a lot about these characters and the things that they've had to deal with in their lives. And that's, it's pretty harrowing stuff, particularly the way the person that we think is going to be the protagonist, or at least the main character of the film, Sung Hyun, if I have that right. We fight, his fate is kind of up in the air. And if we talk a little bit of spoilers towards the end, I might need your help in figuring out exactly what happened, because it's kind of vague to me. I've only seen the movie once.
Me too.
Right. But
Yeah.
the this is going to sound weird, but the main parallel I found to this film
With
was
Megan. Oh.
no,
Oh,
not
okay. Or we'll get to that later.
there is a parallel with Megan, but not this.
All right.
Structurally, and almost like bullet point events wise, this
Uh-huh.
reminds me of True Romance, the Tony
Uh,
Scott film.
well,
Uh,
okay. Road trip picture, but go on.
it's a road trip picture where these people are trying to unload something that they should not have. In True Romance, it was a suitcase full of cocaine. Here, it's a baby. The people are being tracked by cops. Eventually, gangsters get involved. There is
Hmm.
a hotel exchange where there's sort of a Mexican standoff between these three parties that gets interrupted. Doesn't nearly end as violently as that. And of
Mhm.
course, the movie ends. It's almost the last scene, but with a couple at a child, like a new toddler, dancing on the beach.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Wow, that's true. I mean, wow. I wonder if he's watched True Romance. Wow.
I don't know. I think that would be it would be a wonderful kind of double
Double
feature,
feature.
just to
Yeah.
see how tonally you can do stuff with structure and come up with
Right.
completely different results. But yeah, I this is a very hard movie to describe, because it's almost like the heart of a spider web, where you see, okay, there's
Yeah.
a fly, and then as you get out, you see the many different tendrils and threads, and the
Right.
intersections are just completely surprising and unpredictable. So by the time you get to the end of it, you see this masterful tapestry that could be convoluted, but there is just enough information in terms of how each of these story points intersect with each other that you don't feel like, okay, here's another exposition dump. There aren't any exposition dumps.
No, there aren't.
As you mentioned, there's no hand holding. We find out about these people the way that we naturally would if we were coming into a situation with a whole bunch of strangers in a predicament.
Right.
It's yeah, I mean, it's a truly a masterful story that I think it's odd, because there were times when I felt it got a bit preachy almost, but then I realized it only feels preachy because this is a sort of pro family, pro life, I guess, message
Hmm.
that we don't see a whole lot of in mass entertainment. I don't know if that comes down to culture, or if it comes down to something that the director was trying to say, but
Yeah.
it's a beautiful movie. I don't think it's not preachy. It just does have a very definite point of view, and it allows for contrapoints of view to be expressed within the dialogue and the characters, so that you kind of walk away from it thinking, wow, this is all very lovely, and it's a happy resolution for most of the characters. But yeah, it's not exactly soapboxy. I'm having trouble describing it, almost as much trouble as I would have describing the entire plot as you so eloquently laid out, because there's a lot going on.
Well, I tried. Touched on the surface. I mean, there is a lot to take in here. Like you said, I think, um, yeah, the connections obviously come to us gradually, and by connections, I mean this young mother, played by Lee Ju-eun, Moon Soo-young. Um, she's the one who goes, basically decides to um, thrust herself upon the broker's journey here, and says, "Well, I'm coming with." And she, I kind of love how we get to know her a little bit more in the first meeting with the potential parents.
Mm,
It was kind of like on a dock, I think, in a
yeah,
village in another bit town.
yeah,
Little clandestine, a little suspicious, but here are two people who seem like they're in either middle or upper class, upper middle class, and they're asking questions and everything, and um, you know, it's a it's kind of a vulnerable, tender moment there, but also, this the the actual mother, this young woman, basically wraps it up, nips it in the bud, and is basically like, nope, this isn't happening. You know, uh, yeah,
and that's the reason she kind of goes along with these guys. She figures out the racket that
they're in. Yeah,
yeah, well, I want to go back and just kind of clarify something. uh So Young does not leave the baby in the box. She leaves the baby outside the box
Oh,
in the
that's right.
vestibule,
That's right.
which opens up the loophole through which Sang Hyun and Dong Soo typically operate. I get a feeling because inside the actual box, now it sounds crude. It's not just a box. It's like, it's well lit.
It's like
It's warm. It's
this sounds even worse, but it's like a French fryer. Like it's heated, you know. It's like
or like almost like an incubation unit you'd see at a hospital, but
right,
not with
right.
like tubes and stuff hooked up to it.
Yeah,
But there's a camera to record when someone
right,
drops off a baby.
right.
Uh, So Young leaves the child outside the unit, and normally Sang Hyun and Dong Soo would take those kids and usher them into their own version of the black market, try and sell them for themselves because there's
Mm-hmm.
no record of anybody having been dropped off. So the
Right.
next morning they can say, "Do you have any drop-offs?" And you're like, "Nope. Check the records." One of the undercover cops, or not undercover, they're cops working for
Yeah.
the trafficking unit, I
Right.
believe,
Right. Right. Right.
have
Mm-hmm.
been tailing this team for a while. The one Soo Jin, played by Bai Doona, who I recognize from Cloud Atlas from like 11 years ago.
Right. 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 Yeah.
She actually gets out of the car and goes up to the church and puts the baby inside the box, which creates a bit
That's
of a
right.
problem.
Yes. Yes.
That's why they have to delete the footage, the record, and all that. I guess blaming it on a skip or something like that. But so all these characters are getting involved in each other's lives in these little increments that kind of play out greater later on. So Young discovers what is going on with these two guys, confronts them, and basically they agree, "Hey, we'll cut you in on the sale of your baby." And she's
Mm-hmm.
like, "Cool." And that's why she accompanies them to this dock. But the arranged price beforehand had been 10 million won. I just looked up the
Yeah.
conversion rate. I don't know if Google's lying to me, but it's still like 80 cents on the dollar. Um,
Wow.
that's a lot. But they get there, and this couple are like, we'll give you 4 million,
That's right. Yeah.
right? And then she said she kind of flips out because they're talking about the kid as if it's a piece of produce or something, like,
Right.
oh
Right.
yeah,
Right.
this lettuce is a little bit brown on the top.
Right.
And she kind of flips out and says, I would never sell my kids to you my kid to you scumbags." And then they kind of exit the deal. Fortunately, because the two cops are waiting to catch this duo in the act, we see Soo Jin, like after everybody leaves, pop her head out from behind a crate. It just kind of like, damn, foiled again. And it's
Right.
these moments that, talk about a tone that is uneven but perfectly placed at the same time. This is a heavy drama, and it's also this weird, almost situational comedy. There's
Yeah. It's
warmth and
almost.
humor and
Yeah.
also harrowing, tears and, and emotions all around.
Yeah. It's got just the right amount of quirk to it. You know. It's not quite Wes Anderson quirk, but it's more of like more Coen Brothers quirk than Wes Anderson. Um, yeah, and yeah, it's really well balanced. The tone, you know.
It is. And I think even when this is going back to my true romance analogy with the mobsters, there is Sang Yun is in thrall, or he's in debt to a local gangster for I think 50 million won or something like that. It's a
Mhm.
large amount. And these two young hoods drop by his dry cleaning tailoring business one morning, and I don't know if this has been done in a movie before, but it's beautiful. The two kids, they're probably in their early 20s. They show up and they say, "Hey, we need you to clean this shirt for us." And they hand over a white shirt that is covered in bloodstains.
Soaked.
Yeah, and they're
So
like,
it's
"Yeah,
not
we
even white anymore. It's all red.
right." And it was like, "Yeah, we need this clean right away. Oh, by the way, our boss says you got to give him the money by next week." There's no threat, nothing. Just like dropping off a shirt and saying, "Hey, the guy you owe money
Right.
to, he'd like it next week." So good.
Yeah. It
I
kind of
got
drives a
chills.
message.
Right. Yes, it does. And it's not funny. It's just a very clever way to introduce
Right.
characters. And one of the younger ones, I guess, is someone that Sang Hyun knows. He knows his father, kind of like a kid from the
Hmm.
neighborhood who's fallen in with the wrong crowd. He's going to pop up again and become very important later. We haven't even, there's so much to unpack here. I don't think we're
There
going to
is.
have the time, but there's murder, there's prostitution, there is kind of like ransom and all this other stuff going on in this film, and yet it doesn't feel like too much. This movie is only 2 hours and 10 minutes long, but it's so tight
Yeah,
that I
it
can't
really
even
is.
believe it. It feels like this could be an entire like Netflix series.
Yeah, no, I agree. If anything, I feel like the connection that the young mother, Soo Young, has with, I guess, the mafia, uh, it seems not as developed as I would have wanted it to be, or it could have been. Um, yeah,
I don't know if he was in the mafia. I
I
think
couldn't. Yeah,
the impression I got, and this is if there is a downside to not explaining everything, you can kind of get so far into the weeds that your own weeds that you forget that there are other people who need to understand what's going on too. But that leaves room for imagination. The impression I got was there's this very wealthy businessman who got
okay,
a young
that's right.
prostitute, So Young. Her name is So Young, which when you translate that to English, you're like, oh, that really drives home a message. She's so young. She's a young mother.
Yep,
But
yep.
he got her pregnant. Uh, he and his wife offered $5 million to have the
Hush
child
money.
taken care of.
Yeah,
Yeah, get it, have an abortion. So Young decided not to. She had the baby, and then when the businessman found out, I guess there was an argument, and she ends up killing him,
yeah,
which leads to an investigation, all these problems. At that
that's
point,
right.
she had
Yeah,
decided to get rid of the child by dropping it off at this box. The widow now decides that she wants that baby for what I'm not exactly sure. So she hires the two
the two.
local
Yeah,
hoods who are
yeah,
affiliated with the mob to track down the baby and the mom,
yeah.
which also means tracking down the two brokers that she's caught up with, plus the little kid. It's yeah, it's very strange.
Yeah, I mean, it like you said, it all works out. I just feel like it almost warrants a second viewing just to take it all in again, just to see how it all, falls into place, which I'm looking forward to. Along the way, they do make a stop in this kind of rural kind of orphanage location, where, as I mentioned, Dong Su had grown up. He was a child there, and he himself, I think he was either adopted or went to a foster home. Um, and that's an interesting whole setup too. Just the machinations of it all, and that location is very interesting. And even the precocious young boy that I mentioned, that hitches a ride, unexpectedly on their car when they leave. And that is Heijin, or Hyjin,
Mhm.
is the character's name. Um, and he could have been too overly cutesy as a character, but I kind of liked his. He's a young boy. Yes, I call him precocious, but he's a young boy that's really kind of comfortable in his own skin, and really is one of those kids, young boys who just will walk up to you and have a question, like, why are you wearing that color shirt, or whatever. you know um I found that whole orphanage thing, it's just another way of peeling back um who these characters are, because there's a history there for one of the brokers, and it's, like I said, kind of unexpected, and I really enjoyed that.
I watched this on an award season screener that
Yeah, me too.
I had the benefit of rewinding. Now, if you're going to see this in the theater, which I absolutely recommend doing, you got to pay attention because, at least for me, I did not pick up that Dong Su was the same guy who was partnered with Sang Hyun earlier on at the church
Ah,
as the guy who showed up at the orphanage, because there's just something in, and this is a tribute to the actor, I think, the change in demeanor and environment
mm,
and reception is so key to this performance, because he's kind of like this background character. When he shows up to the orphanage, all the kids surround him. He's like known as like the
yeah,
mayor of the orphanage or
yeah.
the king of the orphanage or something. And I watched that scene and the next couple of scenes. I'm like, what happened to that other guy who was
This is the
partnered
same
up with
guy.
Sang-yeon? Yeah, I'm like, I went, oh my god, it's the same dude,
Yeah,
and that put it into
yeah.
a different focus for me.
No, I feel that. I felt that too, when I watched it. And I was just like, oh, we're just seeing a different side of him. This is interesting. How it's almost like a different location. It reminded me of how, maybe when you go back to a family member's home for the holidays, you wind up kind of reverting back to how they remember you as, and so he was, yeah, kind of this, celebrity who is, it's like an alumni of the orphanage and coming back, and all these kids are see him as that. And it's interesting how his interaction and the dynamic between him and the two, I guess it's two main people, a man and a woman, who run the orphanage. I really like their characters. I'm like, okay, can we do a spin-off story on them? Can Hirokazu Koreeda make a movie just called Orphanage or something? Although that's already been a horror movie. But
That was The
yeah,
Orphanage. If he just
yeah,
did
yeah. We
Orphanage.
just Orphanage, yeah. Broker, orphan. I don't know. Yeah, we'll figure that out. But yeah, I mean, there seems like, again, these characters seem so very rich and full of stories themselves. So it's another draw of how he as a writer, not just a director, really humanizes even some of the more ancillary characters.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a predictable, cliched, one note performance or characterization, I don't think, in the whole movie. As you said, pretty much everybody who has a speaking part, you want to know more about, who they are.
Right.
Um, I do want to talk a bit about, speaking of characterization, we get so many dimensions to all these characters that the argument at the center of the film, sort of, is why do we need these boxes?
Mm,
Why does
mm,
society need these boxes?
mm.
Because for whatever reason, young mothers decide that they are not going to be young mothers, and they put the babies in these boxes to go other places. And also, the subject of abortion comes up. Um, what I really admire about this film is, as I kind of hinted at before, a lot of different points of view get
Yeah,
bandied about back and forth,
sure.
and it's clear from the filmmaker what the preference is, because everybody kind of, well, most people kind of end up happy or content because they find family, or family kind of finds them, and even though they kind of splinter off, they are forever changed by the fact that they decided initially to abandon family and eventually discovered the importance of it, and the how it enriches one's life. And it's something I've wrestled with for decades, because
Hmm.
I am pro-choice, but I'm also fiercely anti-abortion in that I don't think it should be denied to people, because it gets into all sorts of different kind of fuzzy areas. But I also, because of the way that I consider life and my own personal experiences with having kids, and
Hmm.
having a kid that didn't quite make it, it's very precious to me. So it's just interesting to see a film tackle this issue from such a perspective of, what, if you do decide to become a parent, because no matter what situation you're in, being a parent is hard. You can have all the money in the world or not a penny
Sure.
to your name. It's not easy.
Nope.
It's just nice to see that kind of explored here, rather than just kind of like I guess I was going to say the Juno route. That was more that was a
Yeah.
slightly different kind of a deal, because it was the message was more like, oh, it's not that big a deal until it is, but there was still more of a pro-choice kind of slant to it, where it's still pro-choice, but it's also heavily pro-life, I think.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Juno. I was thinking of that. I was thinking of like Little Miss Sunshine, as far as like this ensemble going on a van on a road trip with
I
different
thought of that
ages
too.
and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't think it just kind of lays it out like it is. It doesn't really have a certain side or perspective, like say like a documentary would.
Mhm.
And I appreciate that, because what it's doing first and foremost is it is showing these complex characters, and pretty much every one of these characters is a complex character.
Yeah.
And it's showing these, the layers of these complex characters. And um typically we might, you know as we do, we don't try to, but we naturally, judge people, right?
Yeah.
um we the way he does that, peeling back these layers and who these people are, it helps us from staying on one type of judgment for these characters. And like I said, we think that two guys volunteering at a church and then running a side hustle of in the black market, adoption market. You'd think like, oh, these guys are kind of suspicious and nefarious characters and out to make a buck, but there's more going on. There's their history. There's um, Ah Sing Hyun Sing Kang, whose host character is he's such a good actor. I mean, he's so good. He's just like, even when just seeing him like working at his, laundromat, at the sewing machine, I'm like, this is the guy from Parasite. This is just nuts. It's like, he could easily carry or lead a movie, but he's just so good at blending in with an ensemble and being a great character actor. It doesn't really feel like there's any main character in this movie. He could have been. I know you've seen this more recently than I did, but I was a little perplexed with like how his character arc ended in this movie. Like what exactly happened with him, to him, that decision he made to kind of reconnect with one of those two hoods.
Mhm.
What did you get from all that?
And that's why that's what I wanted to ask you about. Now,
Spoiler
folks,
alert.
yeah, folks, here's the point where I think it's both the strongest possible recommendation for David and I.
Yes, yes, yes.
So if you've seen Broker, please continue to watch. If you
Right.
haven't, turn it off now. Come back after you have seen it, hopefully at the
Mhm.
music box.
Yeah,
I think you're gonna have more chances to see that magic because I think this is I would hope that this is gonna be a real contender come awards time.
I hope so. Yeah.
Uh, but all right, so spoilers start now. Thank you and goodbye. For those who haven't seen it. First of all, I want to talk about. I want to echo your sentiments on Song Kang Ho. The scene, and we're in spoiler territory, remember, where we see him having at a cafe with his daughter. Uh,
Hmm.
First of all, I mean, throughout most of the movie, I feel like I either maybe I didn't miss something, and this is more of that kind of like figure it out, the breadcrumbs as you go. I didn't know
Hmm.
what his life story was.
Right.
I didn't think that this guy was the type of guy to have a family, but it turns out
Right.
he did. And either he left them or got the feeling that maybe his wife left him because they had a very young daughter who he mentioned something about being 3 years old. So,
Right.
a long time ago. She's probably like 9, 10 now.
I think so.
Right. So it's that adds another dimension to him trying to put other families together where he couldn't keep his own together, whether he left and he felt guilty about it, or if he felt guilty because he was left.
Right.
That's something you find out in the last like 25 minutes of this 2-hour movie. And you think you've got a character pegged and all of a sudden like completely left field. But when he is sitting with his daughter and she mentions that mom's pregnant, so her new stepdad, the stepfather, whatever, has they're about to conceive. The
Hmm.
look on his face, uh, he's kind of trying to be congratulatory, and then the daughter is like, "Yeah, so mom just would like it if you didn't call anymore or show up to the house."
Mm.
And just that, he just kind of realizes that whatever he had with that part of his life is come to a close, and the nuance of it, that's I don't feel like it's acting. Like nothing in his
Yeah.
performance throughout the entire film felt like it was acting. Again, I'm looking for a parallel to an American actor. Like who the hell can pull this off
Mm.
without it being like, oh, it's Tom Hanks in his latest Oscar bait bid.
No way. No way.
No, uh-uh.
Yeah. No, I don't
So,
see. Yeah.
so getting to the point of the ending, we see him in like a bus station or something, and he catches a news report about how I believe this was the younger gangster. I'd have to go
Yeah.
back and check the name, but I got the feeling they were reporting that he was found dead in a subway station or like a subway underground gift store or
Hmm.
mall or
Yeah,
something.
that's right. Hmm.
And there was 40 million won retrieved from the guy's hotel room. Right before that, or shortly before that, before the kind of time jump, he uh, was with the rest of his crew and they're about to broker this big deal for the child. He splits off from the bigger group,
Hmm.
They go off and they get busted in this sting, and he goes off with the young gangster kid saying, I gotta get, I'm done with these people. Let's you and me get something together. We can do a lot with
Right.
that 40 million. So I don't know what happened there. I get the feeling he killed that kid, but he also didn't take the money. I don't know why he didn't. Maybe he was just looking for a clean break. Maybe
Hmm.
cosmically he's thinking, well, if I'm not, and I don't know exactly what's going through his head or how the local mob works, but I don't feel like you kill a goon and all of a sudden the big boss guy is like, I forgot about the 50 million owed me. So it is kind of a puzzlement, but that's the impression I got, is that he killed that guy, because later on, when they're talking about where everybody is and they're kind of catching up with folks, he hasn't been seen again. So I don't know if he went on the lam, if he killed himself, if he got whacked. We don't know.
Yeah, it's it's kind of surprising how it's sort of left that vague, but it I guess it kind of makes sense considering his own, former domestic situation. Um, that maybe he doesn't see a whole lot of other options, and it would be better off because he sees. And this is the other thing we haven't really talked about is he sees that Dong Su, his partner, is kind of could potentially, you know, have a connection with Su Young,
Mm.
the young mother, and they could hook up and they could have their own kids eventually, or they could, and this young boy could be adopted by them. And so he probably thinks, well, where's my part in all this? Maybe they are better off without me and I could go my own way. And also, I think after what his daughter said to him, that kind of maybe seals the deal.
That could be it. The other thing that strikes me is a scene in the hotel room just before this kind of decision is made. And I got to correct the record. Um, I had mentioned he was maybe killed that kid to get away from the money he owed to the boss. The kid and his partner, his fellow hood, were actually in the employ of the
The
widow,
Yeah,
who was probably contracted them through the mob boss. So it's even more
right,
complicated.
right.
But at one point in the hotel room, he says to Dong Su this line about, how he would kill. He said, "You don't understand because you're not a father, but you would do anything for, to protect your family, including, possibly murder." And it's kind of like an out of left field, like, well, I mean, it's true, but it's like, whoa, where's this coming
Right.
from?
What is he
So
thinking about? Yeah.
right. So maybe he had it in mind that he's gonna, try and at least take out this one peg of the danger that his entire family's in, his new family,
Yeah.
because this widow has hired these people to retrieve that kid at all costs, not really caring what happens to anybody else who gets in the way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's complicated and complex, but also, still has a great flow to it and a great balance and surprising tone. Um, it really is. It's probably within my top five of the year. And yeah, I think it's actually. I mean, I'm kind of I'm kind of glad that this is your first Hirokazu Koreeda. Um, I think it's a good kind of gateway to his filmography. So I'd be happy to talk more of his work with you. So
Well, I'd be happy to check it out, because I mean this
yeah.
this really did dazzle me. I do, before we go, I do want to mention, loop back to the Megan connection, because
Oh
people
yeah,
are
might as
probably
well
waiting
brought it
with
up.
bated breath. It kind of goes back to, the what I am clumsily referring to as the messaging. I'll just say the point of view of this movie, because in Megan, uh, and we'll talk more about this on Thursday,
Right.
getting into the movie, but there is this career woman played by Allison Williams, who comes to sort of adopt her niece,
Hmm.
and she's a robotics engineer at this toy company, and she ends up inadvertently creating a killer robot. But at one point, the killer robot is kind of lecturing her on, who who do you think you are? You've made your decisions. You decided that instead of having a family, you want to be the career woman and you can have it all. And now at the 0 hour, you think you're going to be a mom.
Yeah.
That is something that is, again, kind of counter messaging to what we see in a lot of, uh, I guess, popular media. The idea of shaming Megan, the killer robot, is shaming Allison Williams' character.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's necessarily something to be ashamed of, but I'm saying it is, this idea, it's something to think about
Yeah.
more than just like, you can't hold me down with a family. Well, maybe you're not being held down by a family. Maybe it opens doors to something, else, and also doesn't invite the opportunity for killer robots to enter the picture.
Yeah. Wow. There you go. I could see that.
So yes, a triple feature: True Romance, Broker, and Megan. You heard it here first.
with the apex it being the second movie being the best of the bunch. Yeah, of course.
Yes. And I agree. This is my number 2 film of 2022 officially. RR cannot be taken down.
Glad I could help.
Yes, thank you very much, David, and thank you for suggesting and for talking to me about this movie. Once again, Broker, you can catch it starting tonight at the Music Box Theater in Chicago. I imagine it's playing other kind of art house theaters around the country and maybe even around the world. Definitely check it out. You can thank us later. David Fowley of Keeping It Real, you can check out his stuff down below. If you like this content, please like and subscribe and all that good stuff. David, any closing words on Broker?
No, I guess just that I hope that we see it get an Oscar nomination for foreign language.
But it better not win. That sounds terrible.
We'll see if RR gets it. I mean, it would be great if it does, but yeah.
Yes. If RR loses out, it has to go to Broker. I don't care what the other movies are. Well, that's not fair, but
or Close, which is another one you got to see.
I know you recommended that too. Now I'm going to be fighting between the second place. What are you doing to me, David?
Yeah. Well, watch. You'll probably hate that one, so it'll be all right.
Ooh, challenge accepted. All right, man. Thanks a lot. Take care. We'll talk very soon.
All right. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.